He wasn't supposed to survive nights like this. That's what anyone would have said if anyone had been there to see him. But Samuel Sam Harlow was used to being alone. Sam was 53 years old, though the desert had a way of etching 10 extra years onto a man's face. He was lean but sturdy, with shoulders still squared from years in uniform and a jaw set tight as if the world had dared him to give up, and he hadn't. His hair, once black, had gone mostly gray at the temples. His hands were scarred fingers, stiff from old breaks, but steady. Always steady. Once Sam had been a Marine, a fighter, a survivor. He'd seen places most folks only read about in the papers, places that haunted his sleep more than he cared to admit. Now, after discharge, he lived at the very edge of Oracle, Arizona, out where the paved road turned to gravel, and the gravel finally gave up into sand. His home was no more than a cabin stitched together from shipping crates, rusted tin, and stubbornness. Each night the same ritual. He'd check the padlocks on his generator, restack what little mesquite wood he had left, sweep the porch slow and steady as though brushing away ghosts. Inside, he'd pour himself a cup of coffee so bitter it could peel paint, then sit at the battered table and stare at the same envelope. A letter addressed to his sister back in Missouri. Unsent. Always unsent. That night the wind was restless, the kind of wind that carried grit into your teeth and whispered to you that you didn't belong. Sam leaned against the doorframe, mug cupped in both hands, and muttered to himself, "Another night, Sam. Just you, the coffee, and the silence." But silence has a way of being broken. At first he thought it was just the wind's trick. A shuffle, then a whine, faint but sharp enough to cut through the howl outside. He froze, head tilted. The sound came again, closer this time. Setting down the mug, he reached for the old Winchester propped in the corner. Instinct, not paranoia. You didn't last long in war zones by ignoring the sounds you couldn't name. He moved to the door, peered through the warped glass, and his breath caught. Two shapes stood in the porch light. Dogs. Not coyotes. Not strays looking for trouble. No. These were German shepherds. And they looked like hell. The larger one, male by the cut of his frame, stood tall but unsteady. His coat, once black and tan, was smudged with desert dust and streaked with dried blood. One ear stood straight, the other bent at an unnatural angle. A pale scar ran from his right eye down the length of his muzzle. His golden eyes locked onto Sam's with a steadiness that sent a jolt through the old Marine. Beside him pressed a smaller shepherd female, younger but limping badly. Her right hind leg was tucked up, trembling. Ribs showed beneath her matted fur, and when she shifted, she let out a sound so plaintive, so desperate, it made Sam's throat tighten. They weren't growling. They weren't baring teeth. They were begging. Sam muttered under his breath, "What in God's name?" He tightened his grip on the rifle. The Marine in him calculated risk. Wild dogs could be dangerous. But the eyes staring back at him held no madness, no rage. Only pleading. Only hope. He cracked the door just an inch. The cold slapped him, and the bigger shepherd didn't move, only lowered his head, breathing, shallow tail, low. The smaller one swayed on three legs and pressed closer to her companion for balance. Sam crouched slightly, voice low, gravelly from too many nights and too much smoke. "You here to cause me trouble?" The dogs said nothing, of course, but they didn't flinch, didn't snarl. They just stood there waiting. Sam sighed, jaw working. "All right, but you try anything and you're back out in the cold." Deal with a slow hand, he opened the door wider. The big shepherd stepped forward, first head lowered, moving with a dignity that reminded Sam of an old sergeant, wounded but unbowed. The smaller one limped after tail, brushing against Sam's knee as she passed. He shut the door, sealing out the desert's howl. Inside, the warmth hit the dogs like a wave. They hesitated, then slumped beside the couch, tongues lolling, chests heaving. Sam set the rifle down and crouched for a closer look. "Lord above, you two look worse than I did after Fallujah." He fetched a dented pan, filled it with water, and set it down. The dogs drank greedily, but not frantic. Just thirsty. Just grateful. For a long moment the only sounds were the lap of tongues, the hum of the space heater, and Sam's own heartbeat steadying. From a tin shelf he pulled what he had, jerky, a can of chicken. He laid it out carefully, keeping his movements slow. The shepherds eyed him, then devoured the meal crumbs scattering across the worn rug. Sam leaned back on his heels, almost smiling despite himself. "Guess you're hungrier than me tonight." When they finished, the bigger shepherd sat tall again, watching Sam with those steady eyes. The smaller one whimpered when she shifted her weight, her swollen leg trembling. Sam exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Let's see what we're working with, girl." He moved carefully, murmuring low as he examined the leg. Beneath the dust, he found an angry gash, red and swollen. Infection waiting to happen. "You're lucky," he muttered. "I did a few rounds of field medicine back in the Corps." From his battered first aid kit, he cleaned the wound, wrapped it with gauze-dabbed ointment. The dog flinched but didn't pull away. He kept talking, his voice steady, as much for himself as for her. Memories came unbidden, burning oil shouts in languages he half understood, the sharp sting of sand and smoke. He blinked them away, focusing on the here and now, on saving this one life, maybe two. When it was done, he sat back on the floor. The shepherds watched him quietly, eyes softer now, no longer wild. And for the first time in years, Sam Harlow felt something thread through the silence. A connection. Outside, the wind howled across the desert, rattling the tin roof. Inside, a marine and two broken dogs breathed in rhythm with the heater's hum. Sam leaned his head back against the wall and whispered almost to himself, "Well, looks like it's not just me anymore." The desert dawn always came slow, like it wasn't sure if the sun really wanted to rise on a place like this. That morning, the first pale light slipped through the warped curtains of Sam's cabin. He stirred on the couch neck, stiff from sleep. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream. The sound of breathing that wasn't his own. The warmth in the corner. Then he blinked, rubbed his eyes, and saw them. Two German shepherds curled side by side near the heater. The big one lay still but alert, golden eyes half open, watching the room with the kind of caution only survivors carry. The smaller one twitched in her sleep, letting out a soft whimper, her bandaged leg twitching as if caught in some lingering nightmare. Sam exhaled, slow, muttering to himself, "Well, looks like I've got company after all." He rose, stretching his back till the old joints popped, and shuffled to the stove. His hand found the dented coffee pot, muscle memory more than thought. He set it on the flame, filled the room with the smell of burnt grounds and old tin. As the coffee bubbled, he crouched down by the dogs. The big one blinked, fully awake, lifted his head. Their eyes met again, man and dog, both scarred, both stubborn. Sam reached out a cautious hand, voice low. "Morning, soldier." The shepherd didn't move at first. Then after a beat, he sniffed Sam's knuckles and gave the faintest wag of his tail. Sam almost smiled. "That's more manners than most folks I've met in town." The smaller shepherd stirred, then ears twitching. She blinked up at Sam, her eyes softer, younger, but filled with that same plea he'd seen the night before. She gave a low whine, lifted her head, and licked his wrist. Sam chuckled under his breath. "Well, ain't you the sweet one?" He sat back on his heels, scratching the stubble on his jaw. Naming them felt strange, like naming ghosts. But a man couldn't just keep saying, "Hey, you," forever. He looked at the big one first. "You've got that look. Steady, watchful. Like an old sergeant I knew. Fella who always kept us alive no matter how bad it got. Think I'll call you Sergeant." The dog's ears perked slightly at the sound, as if the name carried weight even he understood. Then Sam turned to the smaller one. "And you? You're tough. Took a hell of a beating, but you still let me patch you up. You remind me of my kid sister, tough but never afraid to lean on someone when it got rough. How about Grace?" The little shepherd wagged her tail once, and Sam smiled for real this time. "Sergeant and Grace. Yeah, that'll do." He rose and poured his coffee black as the desert night sipping slow. For years the mornings had been nothing but silence, the kind that weighed on a man's chest. But now the silence felt different. Not empty. Not anymore. Grace limped after him as he moved about the cabin, her bandaged legs stiff, but her spirit restless. Sergeant stayed close by her, never letting her stray too far. Sam noticed it right away. "You two stick together, don't you? Don't let the world tear you apart." Wish I could say I did the same. His voice faltered at the end, carrying the weight of memory. Faces of men he'd lost. The sound of last breaths on cold nights far from home. He took another sip of coffee, swallowed hard, and changed the subject, if only for himself. By late morning, Sam stepped outside the desert sun, already burning off the chill. Sergeant followed to the porch, standing tall, sniffing the air every inch the watchman. Grace sat at the doorway, ears perked, but content to let her companion keep guard. Sam chopped mesquite branches for firewood, the steady thunk of the axe a rhythm against the still air. Every so often he glanced back, finding Sergeant watching him like a sentinel, Grace watching Sergeant. He wiped sweat from his brow, muttered to himself, "Guess I've got a unit again. Didn't figure on that." That evening he shared what little food he had, jerky torn into strips, canned beans, and water from the rain barrel. They ate beside him, not frantic, just steady, as though they understood this was more than survival. It was trust being built, bite by bite. Afterward, Sam sat on the porch with a cigarette, something he only allowed himself on nights when the loneliness cut too sharp. Sergeant lay at his boots, Grace curled against his side. He stared at the horizon where the sky burned orange and purple. "You know," he said aloud, as if the dogs might answer, "I came out here to disappear, to let the world forget me. But the desert, it had other plans, didn't it?" Sergeant lifted his head at the sound of his voice, ears twitching. Grace sighed, pressing closer. Sam chuckled softly. "Yeah, I hear ya. Maybe we all came out here looking for the same damn thing." As the night closed in and the wind picked up again, Sam realized something he hadn't felt in years. Not peace, not yet, but purpose. A reason to keep the fire lit, the doors locked, the world at bay. And it started with two broken dogs who refused to give up. The desert has a way of leaving signs if you know how to look. Sam Harlow had spent enough years tracking boot prints in foreign sand to notice when something didn't belong. 2 mornings after Sergeant and Grace showed up, he was out behind the cabin splitting mesquite wood when he froze. There, pressed faintly into the dust near the cattle fence, were paw prints. Not coyotes, too big, too steady. And not from the dogs inside. These were fresh, cautious circling, but not bold. Sam set down the axe, squinted at the tracks, and muttered under his breath, "Well now, you've got a friend out here, don't you?" Sergeant, who'd followed him out, gave a low rumble in his throat. Grace limped to the doorway, ears twitching as if she understood. Sam crouched, running his rough fingers over the prints. "Looks like somebody's been watching. Question is, are they watching me or watching you?" He rose, brushed the dust from his palms, and went back inside. At the table he scribbled a quick note, just in case. If the ranger from town stopped by, she'd know where he went. Then he strapped on his old field pack, a bottle of water, a flashlight, a strip of jerky, and the same battered first aid kit he'd carried through more battles than he could count. Sergeant whined, low, tail stiff. Grace limped forward, trying to follow. Sam knelt and stroked her head gently. "Not this time, sweetheart. You stay here. Sergeant'll keep watch. I'll bring him back if I can." With that, he stepped into the wash behind the cabin boots, crunching against the crusted dirt. The sun was already high, but the air carried a chill that whispered of another storm brewing somewhere beyond the ridges. The trail wound through thorn brush and dried Palo Verde, and after a quarter mile Sam saw it. A shape huddled in the shadows of a downed tree. At first he thought it was nothing but a bundle of brush. Then it moved. A shepherd. Smaller than Sergeant, older than Grace, coat patchy and gray with dust. One paw was lifted, twisted at an odd angle. The ribs showed sharp beneath the skin. And when the dog lifted its head, Sam's breath caught. Those eyes, amber gold, the same as Grace's. The shepherd bared its teeth, not in rage but in fear. Tried to rise, failed, collapsed with a muffled yelp. Sam crouched low, voice steady as he'd done with wounded civilians overseas. "Easy now. I ain't here to hurt you." He set his pack down, palms open, moving inch by inch. The dog trembled but didn't bolt. For a long minute, man and animal just breathed the same dry desert air. Finally, Sam reached out and touched its shoulder. The shepherd flinched, then lowered its head, too weak to resist. Sam saw the wound clear now, a jagged gash along the side, likely barbed wire, red and raw. The paw was swollen, broken, or near to it. He worked quick years of field training guiding his hands. A splint from a branch. Gauze wrapped tight. A trickle of water poured into a cap. The shepherd lapped it hesitantly, then shivered against his touch. Sam sighed, slipping one arm beneath its chest, the other under its hind legs. He grunted as he lifted too light, far too light. "You're lighter than my old pack, Dusty. That's what I'll call you. Dusty. 'Cause you look like you've been blown through every storm this desert's got." The dog whimpered but didn't fight as Sam staggered to his feet, carrying him back toward the cabin. By the time he returned, sweat stung his eyes, muscles burning. Grace barked sharply from the doorway, then stopped the moment she saw the newcomer. Sergeant's stiffened ears, tall tail rigid. Sam laid Dusty on a pile of blankets near the heater, then stepped back, letting the dogs do what he could not. Grace limped over first, sniffing cautiously. She whined, high-pitched tail wagging once, twice. Dusty lifted his head, let out a low woof, barely more than breath. Sergeant circled close, eyes narrowed, then finally lowered his head in recognition. The three touched noses sniffed, pressed together, exhausted but united. Sam leaned against the wall, breath ragged, watching the reunion. For the first time in years, his cabin didn't feel like a bunker. It felt like something else. Something he hadn't dared think about in a long time. A home. He whispered softly, almost like a prayer. "Well now, looks like it's you three and me against the world." The desert don't whisper when trouble's coming. It growls. Low, steady, like a freight train too far off to see, but close enough to make the ground shiver. 3 days after Dusty stumbled into his life, Sam Harlow felt it in his bones. He'd lived long enough under desert skies to know when the air was wrong. The morning had started calm, but by noon the horizon had turned the color of rust. The wind carried grit sharp enough to sting the eyes, and even the mesquite trees seemed to hunch down, bracing for what was rolling in. Sam stood on the porch, cigarette clamped between his lips, eyes squinting into the haze. Sergeant sat beside him, ears tall, body tense. Grace lingered at the doorway, limping slightly but refusing to rest. Dusty curled near the step, head low, eyes half shut, but nose twitching at every change in the air. Sam muttered through a breath of smoke. "Storm's building, and not the kind you ride out easy." He flicked the ash into the dirt, turned back inside, and reached for his old radio. Static, then nothing. He smacked the side of it, got a faint crackle. A woman's voice, familiar. It was Helen Ramirez, the local ranger who'd checked on him from time to time. Tough as leather voice, like gravel smoothed by kindness. "Sam, you reading this big blow rolling off the basin? Forecast says 12 hours, maybe more. You buttoned up out there?" Sam pressed the receiver, voice steady. "Buttoned up best I can, Helen. Got company this time. 3 of 'em. Shepherds." There was a pause, then Helen's voice softened. "Well, guess the Lord finally gave you neighbors. Keep 'em close. I'll see if Louise can run supplies your way before dark." Sam set the radio down, glanced at the dogs. "You hear that?" Even the ranger's worried. That ain't good news. He moved through the cabin with practiced hands. Every motion was survival muscle memory. He nailed old tarps over the weak window seams, dragged sandbags from the shed to line the porch, stacked mesquite tighter by the hearth. Sergeant followed him step for step, eyes sharp. Grace hobbled after until Sam finally knelt, hand on her muzzle. "Not you, Grace. You save your strength. I'll do the heavy lifting." Dusty tried to rise, whined, then sank back down, his splinted paw trembling. Sam crouched beside him, smoothing the dog's fur. "Easy, boy. Storm'll pass. They always do. Trick is, you just gotta outlast it." By late afternoon, the sky had gone sepia, like the whole world had been dipped in dirty water. Sunlight filtered weakly, casting everything in a sickly gold. Sam lit the lantern inside the flame, flickering against the warped walls. He set a pot of water to boil, poured coffee grounds into the tin, and muttered to himself while stirring. Coffee's cheap armor, but armor's armor. When the wind picked up, rattling the tin roof, Grace whimpered. Sergeant pressed against her side, standing tall. Dusty lifted his head and gave a low growl as if warning the storm it had picked the wrong cabin. Sam pulled his chair close to the fire, sat heavy, and looked at the 3 pairs of eyes watching him. For a long while, nobody moved. Man and dogs listening to the wind claw at the cabin. He raised his mug in a half-toast voice, rough, steady. "All right, you 3. Looks like it's us against the desert tonight. Sergeant Grace Dusty, you just hold on. Old Sam's got enough fight left for one more round. Outside, the first wall of sand slammed against the cabin, a sound like 1,000 fists pounding tin. The lantern flickered. The heater groaned. The storm had come. And inside that patched-together cabin, 4 survivors braced for the longest night of their lives. The storm hit full force after nightfall. Not just wind, not just sand. It was fury. A wall of sound and grit that shook the desert floor and hammered against Sam Harlow's patched-up cabin like it wanted to tear the whole place down. The lantern flickered. The tin roof screamed. The seams in the windows rattled like bones in a coffin. Inside, Sam pressed his back against the door frame, shoulders braced as if holding the whole shack together with nothing but muscle and stubbornness. His breath came hard dust, already sneaking in through every crack. Sargent stood firm by the door, hackles raised eyes, sharp body trembling, but not from fear, from the fight inside him. Grace whined, pressing low against the wall, her injured legs stiff. Dusty lay curled near the heater, eyes wide, ears twitching with every thunderous slam of the storm. Sam spat into the dirt, voice rough. "Hold together, damn it! Hold together!" Then came the sound he dreaded most. Crack. A beam, old wood half-rotted, holding up the porch roof, gave way under the storm's assault. It groaned once, then split like a rifle shot swinging down in the gale. Sam saw it through the broken shutter. He swore, dropped his shoulder, and lunged for the door. If the beam tore free, it could cave the whole side of the cabin. He had to tie it, brace it, do something. He shoved the door open, the wind nearly ripping it from his hands. Sand blasted his face, grit cutting into his skin like glass. He staggered into the storm rope in hand, lungs burning. Behind him he heard Grace's desperate whine. Dusty barked sharp and frantic, and then Sargent's growl, low and steady like a soldier giving one last command. Sam reached the sagging beam, tried to haul it upright, the rope cutting into his palms. But he wasn't 30 anymore. He wasn't even 40. His knees shook, his back screamed, and the beam slipped. The wind roared, and suddenly Sargent was there. The shepherd slammed into Sam's side, knocking him clear. Sam hit the dirt hard, breath blasted from his lungs. He rolled coughing and looked up just in time to see the beam come down. It didn't hit him. It hit Sargent. The crash was deafening, wood splintering against the sand, the storm howling its approval. Sargent yelped once, sharp and short, then collapsed under the weight. Sam scrambled forward, heart in his throat. "Sargent, no, damn it, boy. No!" He shoved at the beam muscles, straining, dust filling his mouth. Somehow, with a grunt that tore through his ribs, he heaved it just enough to drag the shepherd free. Sargent lay in the sand chest, heaving, blood seeping through his coat where the wood had struck. His golden eyes fluttered, then locked onto Sam's. Sam dropped to his knees, cradled the dog's head in his scarred hands, tears cutting clean lines down his dust-caked face. "Why'd you do it, huh? That should have been me. You hear me? Me!" Grace limped out into the storm, pressing against Sargent's side, whining so soft it broke what was left of Sam's heart. Dusty dragged himself to the doorway, barking hoarse as if begging his brother to hold on. Sam bent low, forehead against the shepherd's. His voice cracked a whisper in the howl. "You saved me, soldier. Just like the old days. Always watching my back. Always taking the hit." Sargent's chest rose once, twice. His tail gave a faint thump against the ground, weak but steady. One last salute. Then silence. The storm raged on, tearing at the world around them, but in that moment all Sam heard was his own heartbeat, the sound of a life leaving his arms, and the echo of loyalty so fierce it carved itself into his bones. He screamed into the night, voice ripped raw, "God Almighty, take me, not him!" But the desert gave no answer, only the wind and the endless grit of sand. Sam gathered Sargent's body against his chest, rocking like a man who'd lost more than a dog. He'd lost his brother, his protector, the one soul who'd still believed in him. Through the tears and dust, he whispered broken words only the dead could hear. "Rest easy, Sargent. You did your duty. You saved your family. I'll carry you with me, every damn step left in me." and as he carried the limp body back inside, the storm pounding harder than ever, Grace and Dusty pressed close to his legs, trembling but unyielding. The three of them moved as one, bound by loss, bound by love, and bound by the sacrifice of the one who'd given everything. The storm didn't care. Didn't care that a brave old shepherd had given his life. Didn't care that a man knelt in the sand cradling a friend who should have had more time. No. The desert roared on cruel and endless. Sam dragged Sargent's limp body back inside the cabin, his arms trembling, his chest burning with sobs he hadn't let out since the war. The door slammed behind them, rattling on its hinges, as if the storm itself tried to claw its way in. He laid the shepherd down on the blanket by the heater, though no warmth could reach him now. Grace limped forward, her nose pressed to her brother's muzzle, whining sharp and desperate. Dusty hobbled closer, nudging at Sargent's side as if refusing to believe. Sam sank beside them, shoulders bowed, both hands gripping the dog's fur like he could hold the life inside if only he squeezed hard enough. His voice broke as he whispered, "Come back, Sargent. You hear me? You don't get to leave me like this. Not after I just found you." But the body was still. Only the storm moved. Sam's chest heaved. His head dropped until his forehead rested against the shepherd's. And there in the dim lantern glow, tears carved deep tracks down the face of a man who thought he'd forgotten how to cry. He muttered into the silence, voice ragged, "I buried too many men overseas. Thought maybe God was done taking from me. But no. He wanted you too." Grace let out a cry, then long and hollow a sound that tore through the cabin and into Sam's bones. Dusty answered with a bark sharp, insistent, as if calling Sargent back from wherever he'd gone. Sam reached for both of them, pulling them close, their trembling bodies pressed against his knees. His arms wrapped around what was left of the pack, holding on like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "We'll make it," he rasped, more a vow than a comfort. "We'll damn well make it for him. You hear me, for Sargent?" The storm battered the cabin harder. The lantern flickered, almost gave out. The roof groaned like it might surrender. Sam pushed himself up, wiped his face with the back of his hand, and forced his voice steady. "No more lying down. Not tonight. We're gonna finish what he started. We're gonna outlast this hell." He moved with the energy of a man possessed. He shoved crates against the weakest walls, jammed sandbags tighter along the seams. Every blow of the wind was a challenge, and every nail he hammered home was his answer. Grace limped after him, refusing to leave his side. Dusty dragged his splinted paw, but still pressed close, barking low at each gust as though daring the storm to do its worst. Sam shouted over the howl voice, hoarse but fierce, "Come on, you bastard storm! You already took one of us. You ain't taking the rest." Time blurred. Minutes felt like hours. The storm shrieked and clawed, but inside that cabin, 3 survivors held on 2 dogs and a man who'd been ready to die himself until one old shepherd gave him a reason to keep living. At some point, Sam collapsed back into his chair, Grace and Dusty curling against his boots. His body shook with exhaustion, but his hands stayed clenched, knuckles white as if still holding Sargent's spirit close. The lantern, guttered, nearly went out. The storm still raged. And yet, Sam whispered into the dark, "You ain't gone, Sargent. Not really. You'll walk with us through every damn mile left. You'll stand guard every night. You'll never leave this cabin." His voice cracked, and for the first time since Sargent fell, Sam allowed himself to believe it. Not gone, just carried forward. Outside, the wind roared like the voice of God himself. But inside, despite the grief, despite the ache that split his chest wide open, there was something else. A flame, small but steady, the kind of flame a man doesn't light on his own. The storm broke at dawn. Not quick, not clean like most things in the desert, it dragged itself out, stubborn, unwilling to let go. But slowly the howl faded. The walls stopped trembling, and the silence that followed was almost as loud as the fury that came before. Sam Harlow opened his eyes to the dim glow of morning. His body ached in every joint, his throat burned raw from dust and shouting. For a moment he didn't move. He was afraid. Afraid that if he lifted his head, if he faced the truth, he'd find it all had been for nothing. But then a soft sound reached him. A whine. Gentle, alive. Grace bandaged legs stiff, nosed at his boot. Dusty lay curled by the door, ears twitching, eyes tracking him with weary vigilance. They were there. They had made it. Sam pushed himself upright, groaning, and staggered to the window. With both hands he pried the warped curtain aside. And there it was, dawn after the storm. The desert stretched out like another world. Dunes, reshaped hills of sand piled against the fences, the air heavy with a copper glow. The sun bled through the haze, painting everything in molten gold. Sam stood there for a long time, one hand braced on the frame. His lips moved barely above a whisper. We outlasted it, but not all of us. Behind him, the blanket by the heater lay heavy with silence, the place where Sargent should have been. Sam turned back, dropped to his knees beside it. His calloused hands rested on the folded cloth, trembling. Grace limped close, curling against the spot, her whine low and grieving. Dusty lowered his head, pressing his nose into the floorboards. Sam bent forward, forehead resting on his fists. His voice cracked open, soft, aching. You did it, Sergeant. You saved us. You'll never know what you gave me, what you gave all of us. The old Marine's tears fell, darkening the blanket. He hadn't wept like this since he buried his brothers overseas. But this loss cut just as deep. After a while he rose. He moved like a man much older than his years, each step heavy but steady. He opened the door and the desert morning rushed in, cool, sharp, alive. He carried Sargent's body out, wrapped in the worn blanket. Grace and Dusty followed, silent tails low. Sam chose a spot on the ridge behind the cabin where the wind brushed gentle and the view stretched wide across the valley. With bare hands he dug into the sand, and stone, sweat, and tears mingling until a shallow grave took shape. He laid the shepherd down carefully, like a father tucking in a child. His hands lingered on the fur one last time. Rest easy, soldier. You've stood your post. We'll take it from here. Grace whimpered, placing her paw on the edge of the mound. Dusty barked once, sharp like a salute. Sam covered the body stone by stone until the earth held Sargent close. Then he stood back, straight, eyes fixed on the horizon, and for the first time in years he raised his hand in a slow, trembling salute. The wind caught his voice as he whispered, Semper Fi, old boy. The desert was quiet now. No storm, no fury, just the steady beat of a sun climbing higher, promising another day. Sam turned back to the cabin. Grace limped at his side. Dusty pressed close, nudging his hand. They walked together, three survivors carrying the memory of the one who had made it possible. And though grief pressed heavy on his chest, something else walked with him too. A promise that Sargent's sacrifice wouldn't be wasted, that they would go on. That night the desert was finally still. No wind, no howling, just silence so deep it pressed against the walls of the cabin. Sam Harlow sat at the battered wooden table, a lantern glowing soft at his elbow. Before him lay a sheet of paper yellowed at the edges and a pen that hadn't been used in years. The letter. He'd started a dozen like it, all torn up, all left unsent. But tonight his hand didn't shake. Tonight he owed more than silence. Grace lay curled at his feet, her breathing slow, bandaged leg rising and falling with each steady sigh. Dusty rested by the door, his good eye fixed on Sam like a guard who refused to sleep. The cabin smelled of smoke and dust, but for the first time in a long time it also smelled of life. Sam lifted the pen and the words came. Dear Anna, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to send it. But I need to write it down. For me. For them. For him. 3 nights ago I opened my door to 2 broken dogs. And last night I buried one. His hand paused, his jaw tightening. He looked down at Grace, who stirred in her sleep, and then at Dusty, who thumped his tail softly as if to remind Sam he wasn't alone. He kept writing. I named him Sargent. He was strong, proud, and loyal to the end. He saved my life, Anna. He gave his so I could see another sunrise. I never thought I'd grieve like this again. I thought war had taken all my tears. Turns out I had one more left to give. And maybe that's God's way of telling me I'm not finished yet. Sam leaned back, staring at the lantern flame, his voice low as if reading aloud to ghosts. You hear that, Sergeant? You didn't just save me. You woke me up. You reminded me there's still something worth standing for. He bent again over the page. I think I might come home soon, Anna. I've been running long enough. Maybe it's time to stop hiding in the desert. Grace and Dusty still need me, and truth be told, I need them too. We'll carry Sergeant with us every step. Maybe when I see you, I'll tell you everything, the storm, the sacrifice, the way his eyes never left me, not even at the end. Maybe you'll understand why I believe for the first time in years that I was spared for a reason. His hand slowed, and he signed it simply. Your brother Sam. He folded the letter, slid it into the worn envelope, and set it on the table. Not ready to send, but not torn up either. For once the words stayed. Sam rose and stepped outside. The night sky over Oracle stretched wide, black velvet stitched with stars, brighter than he'd seen in years. He breathed deep, the cold air filling his lungs. Grace limped to his side, pressing against his leg. Dusty patted after tail, swaying low. Sam rested a hand on each of their heads, his voice soft but steady. We'll keep going. For him. For us. I promise. Out on the ridge, the grave lay quiet beneath the starlight. The wind brushed over it gently like a hand on a soldier's shoulder. And Sam, Harlow Marine survivor, broken man now made whole again, lifted his face to the heavens and whispered one last vow. You'll never be forgotten, Sergeant. Not as long as I draw breath. The desert answered with silence. But in that silence, Sam found peace. Sometimes the miracles we wait for don't come in thunder or lightning or burning skies. Sometimes they come quietly, on four legs, with tired eyes and a heart still willing to give, even when the world has taken almost everything. Sergeant gave his life so that a broken Marine, a broken man, could remember what it means to live. Grace and Dusty survived because he stood his ground, and Sam Harlow carried on because one old dog chose to protect instead of surrender. That's the kind of loyalty you don't read in books or find in speeches. That's the kind of loyalty only a dog can teach. And maybe, just maybe, it's also God's way of reminding us that even in the harshest deserts of our lives, we're not forgotten. His love finds us, through strangers, through storms, through the silent courage of a shepherd who refused to let go. So if you're listening tonight and the silence feels too heavy or the nights too long, remember this story. Remember Sergeant. Remember that sacrifice isn't the end, it's the beginning of hope for those who remain. And if you've ever been saved by love in whatever form it came to you, through a friend, a family member, or a dog who gave more than he had, hold on to that. Carry it forward. Be someone's reason to believe again. Because out here in this vast and lonely world, we all need that reminder. None of us walk alone. Gyonglang sung cham rai nyu nyan yu truk tip din kenya. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us if you've ever known a dog like Sergeant. And if you believe that courage and loyalty can still change lives, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story of faith redemption and the quiet miracles that walk among us. May God bless you, and may He keep every soul, man and dog alike, safe on the road ahead.